Hey guys, it's Chris. From priceless artifacts to legendary cities, here are 8 places lost to history. Number 8. Nauru. Nauru is an island country that can be found in the Pacific Ocean. It's actually halfway between Hawaii and Australia. It's only 8 square miles, but at one time it was known as one of the most pleasant islands in the world. It was first inhabited around 3,000 years ago, if not more, by the Micronesians and the Polynesians. And during their time on the island, there were about 12 different tribes that lived there. And this is why the country's flag has a 12-pointed star upon it. As an island nation, the people heavily relied on the fruit of the trees and the fish in the waters to get them their food. In fact, Nauru actually translates to I go to the beach. In 1798, a British captain named John Fern saw the island and gave it the nickname of Pleasant Island because of its vegetation and very green terrain. The problem, though, was that after being annexed and taken over by the United Nations and other parties, the island was strip-mined because it has phosphate in it, a highly valuable substance. Because of the voracity of the mining, the island was left to ruin. And now it holds a prison and is known for various dark deals. Number 7. Syria's heritage sites. War is known to have many casualties. This is a fact we know. But the casualties often go beyond human life and stretch out to the very world that's being destroyed by these wars. Syria, in recent history, has been going through a lot via its own war. And a big casualty to this war are the World Heritage Sites that the country has proudly shown off for years. For example, in 2012, a fire caused by the war burned down the famed Aleppo souk. In 2013, the Krak de Chivoli Castle was hit by a bomb and partially destroyed, though reconstruction has begun. By the time 2014 came around, about 300 heritage sites in Syria were either damaged or destroyed because of the war, meaning that hundreds of pieces of the country's history are lost to time or will never be the same again. Number 6. ATACAMA Desert Artifacts. In Chile, there is a desert known as ATACAMA, and it is in fact the driest place on the face of the earth. This is due to the lack of moisture in the atmosphere. While this makes the place rather uninhabitable, it does make it the perfect place to preserve the writings and artifacts of the pre-Columbian people that resided there for quite some time. Archaeologists have found numerous sites in the area, and they held insights into the people who lived in the Atacama Desert. This includes massive drawings made by them, known as geoglyphs. However, starting in 2009, the Atacama Desert became home to something unexpected, a rally race called the Dakar Rally. While this may have been okay in context, the organizers of the event didn't take into account the preservation aspect of the area. And so the races bulldozed through very sensitive archaeological areas and ruined numerous drawings and artifacts. Just the 2011 race damaged 44% of the sites in the area. And the race continues to go on to this day, damaging more and more of these ancient artifacts. Number 5. Tibetan monasteries. The people of Tibet are a very religious culture, and one of the things they value more than anything else is their monasteries, where they go to pray and perform their rituals. But when China invaded Tibet back in 1950, they repressed the people's rights and made examples of their monasteries by burning them to the ground. Since that invasion, 6,000 monasteries were destroyed, and that's to say nothing of the hundreds of thousands of people that were tortured or killed by the Chinese during said invasion. By 1978, only 8 monasteries in Tibet remained, and the repression of their religion and rites continues. Though the remaining Tibetan monks, said to be less than 1,000 now, they are fighting to end this reign of terror and rebuild what was lost. Number 4. The Library of Alexandria. Easily one of the biggest losses in terms of academia, the Library of Alexandria was said to be one of the largest and most famous libraries in the world during its time. What's forgotten is that it was actually just one half of a building and was also connected to a museum. It was created by Ptolemy Soter, ancestor to Cleopatra, and maintained by his people during the 3rd century BC. However, the library was not to last, as the place was burned to the ground, with all its immense knowledge taken with it. But there are some who claim the library was actually in decline by the time it was apparently burned down by Julius Caesar. Regardless of how it was taken down, though, it's widely considered one of the greatest losses of knowledge in human history. Number 3. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It's likely not a stretch to say you've heard of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon at one point in time or another. This place has been called one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world since they named said wonders. However, despite the claim of it as a wonder, it's actually never been found. So if it's never truly been found, why is it such a noted piece of history? Well, it all started with a document written by Berossus of Babylon, who noted that in the time of 600 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar II had the Hanging Gardens built in honor of his wife, Amatis, though others say it was made by the Queen Semiramis in the 9th century BC. Now, according to the documentation, the gardens didn't actually hang, but because of how the plants grew in the garden, it did drape over the architecture, thus how it got its name. The topic of the Hanging Gardens is tricky, because Babylon did exist and had a nice time as the center of an empire. Many feel that the city itself was actually in what is now Iraq. However, despite knowing where the city is, the gardens were never seen in any part. Furthermore, outside of Berossus, the only other documented mention of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon was by a Greek historian named Diodorus Siculus and a few other Roman writers. There's no other mentions anywhere of it, including in Babylonian texts, where you would think the people who'd made the garden would talk about it. But they didn't. So what happened to the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon? 3 theories exist that may explain its absence. One was that the gardens were a myth made up by the people for one reason or another. The second theory is that the place was real and then was destroyed either by man or by nature. This is the theory that many believe given the turbulent nature of the land in the time period, and there were recorded earthquakes around the time it was lost. Finally, the legend could actually refer to another garden, one that was near Mosul. Regardless of what it was or wasn't, people are still searching for this wonder of the world. Number 2. Atlantis. The legend of Atlantis is one that spans many cultures, and some believe that despite its legend status, that it's actually a real place. I was obsessed with Atlantis when I was a kid. Many talk about Atlantis even though we can't actually confirm that it was a real place, yet many think it is, and many are searching the oceans for it to this day. And given that many lost cities have been found underwater, it gives hope to those who feel that it truly does exist. The first record of Atlantis ever being mentioned at all was in 360 BC by the legendary philosopher Plato. He described an island nation that had more advanced technology than anyone in the world before, or possibly since. Furthermore, it was said to have a navy that was unmatched. But in 9600 BC, something happened to Atlantis, and it sank. Notice that there's a 9,300-year difference from when Plato writes about Atlantis and when it apparently sank. Why did no one talk about it before that time? Regardless of the lack of historical proof, there have been many expeditions to try and find definitive proof that Atlantis exists. And while that has gone on, there are many stories and legends within pop culture about Atlantis as a nation. There is DC Comics and Marvel, who each have their own interpretation of what Atlantis is and isn't and who rules it. In DC Comics, Atlantis was sunk by the gods, or after Neptune used his legendary trident to protect the city from danger. Depends on the time period, and has resided in the bottom of the ocean ever since. It is indeed a legendary city that has very advanced technology as well as magic, and it's one of the homes of Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. Atlantis may indeed be a legend, but it's a legend that honestly inspires people to think about what our world used to be, and what it can still be. To that end, if they prove Atlantis is real, then our entire world's history would change in an instant. And because of that, it's worth risking everything to try and find the slightest proof that it was or is real. Number 1. Mesopotamia. While technically not lost to history, the land known as Mesopotamia, which many consider the birthplace of man in some ways, looks nothing like what it did back in the earliest days of history. In fact, Mesopotamia is said to be the birthplace of written history. The area itself is part of Southwest Asia, specifically between the legendary Tigris and Euphrates river system. It was a place that was settled as far back as the Paleolithic era, and by 14,000 BC, the first semblances of a civilization took form. It was in Mesopotamia that certain history-changing inventions were made, like the wheel, maps, sailing, writing, and of course, true civilization. They were living in houses of circular nature by the time 14,000 BC came around. And around 5,000 years later, this civilization learned how to farm and even use the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates via irrigation. The people of Mesopotamia continued to grow until they were able to form their own cities, like Uruk in 3200 BC. If you're curious, the reason that it's lost to history is because for many thousands of years after its colonization, the land would be taken over by many different tribes of people. The Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Hittites, and even Alexander the Great during his reign. And now it's just another part of the world. But at one time, it was very nearly the birthplace of modern human society. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these places lost to history? Do you know of any other place that met a similar fate? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.